Today's topic is the format for a 5-paragraph essay. In the essential question box, write down, how do I properly organize my writing in an essay? Let's begin by addressing the 3 different parts of an essay. The first part of an essay is called the introduction. Most introductions have just 1 paragraph. The second part of an essay is called the body. And it can have as many paragraphs as are needed in order to get across a point. The third part is called the conclusion. And it is usually 1 paragraph. Now, if we consider that this is a 5-paragraph essay, if we've got 1 paragraph in the intro and 1 paragraph in the conclusion, then there would be 3 paragraphs in the body. Let's take a closer look at an introduction. The introduction is the first paragraph of a 5-paragraph essay. It has 3 parts to it. The first part is called a hook. And a hook has a lot of different ways in which it can be written, but today we'll focus mainly on just 5. One method for a hook is using a quote. The key with using a quote, though, is it needs to come from either a famous person or it could come from a piece of literature. Another method is to use an anecdote. An anecdote is a short, personal story. It helps build connections between the author and the reader. Interesting facts are also a good way to capture your reader's interest. But keep in mind, you can't just use any fact in the whole world. It has to be interesting. The interesting part is what is going to get someone to want to read what you have to say. Statistics are another method. Statistics can be useful because they do help add authority to what you are saying. It also shows possibly where you're coming from when it comes to a topic, or maybe where you're going in relation to that topic. Possibly my favorite hook is using a shocking statement. I mean, nothing beats the element of surprise. A hook doesn't have to be very long. In most cases, it's probably only maybe 1 to 3 sentences. So don't spend an awful lot of time on it. The second part of the introduction is called the bridge, and sometimes also known as the connecting sentences. The bridge builds a connection between the hook and the topic of the thesis statement. The third part of an introduction is the thesis statement. It does two things. First of all, it states an argument and an opinion about the topic for the entire essay. Secondly, it gives a list of the reasons why. Now let's talk about the body paragraph. Each body paragraph follows a very similar pattern. All body paragraphs begin first with a topic sentence. A topic sentence should do two things. First, it should refer back to the thesis statement's argument. Second, it should reference the first reason that was listed in the thesis. The topic sentence should be just one sentence long. After the topic sentence, there should be an explanation. The explanation should answer the questions how or why. For example, if my thesis statement was arguing about dogs being much better companion pets than cats are, in my topic sentence, I would want to establish that concept again. So maybe I would say that dogs are often called a man's best friend, unlike cats, because they are very loyal. Okay, so then in the explanation, I would need to explain how or why that dog has better loyalty than a cat. I could argue that a dog is a lot less likely to leave their owner if their owner needs help, and that the dog might bark, and that would bring someone to come and help. Whereas cats they're probably not going to do a whole lot. Establishing why a statement you make is true is great, but it doesn't hold any weight unless there's good, strong evidence to support it. So after the explanation, you want to make sure to use some evidence. You can't just throw evidence in there, though. There is a process. So it's very important that when you use evidence, you first of all introduce your source. This is so important, actually, that I'm going to put a box around it to make it stand out. After that introduction, then you can add in the quote. And you don't want to just use any quote. Make sure it comes from a reliable source. Don't forget to include citations as needed. After the quote, you want to be sure to comment on that quote. The comment should explain how the evidence supports the information in the topic, sentence, and the thesis. This is a really important piece. Sometimes it might not be obvious to the reader how your evidence is supporting your argument. So it's important to do that work for them. In order to have a strong argument, each point should have a minimum of at least 2 sources. So once you've commented on your first quote, then you want to transition into your second piece of evidence. The transition is important. It gives the reader a clue that you are moving on from one piece of evidence to the next. After the transition, you introduce and use the second source. And then you comment on it, just like you did the first piece of evidence. And then finally, to wrap it all up in that one-body paragraph, you finish with a concluding statement. It essentially just restates the topic sentence, but it uses different words. Body paragraphs 2 and 3 follow the same format and structure of the first paragraph, except they have one additional thing. In the topic sentence, they have a transitional phrase. Inside that transitional phrase, some teachers require you to restate the previous point and then add in the next. But this can vary from teacher to teacher. Regardless, it is important to include some sort of transition so that your reader knows that you're moving from one concept to another concept. The final section of a 5-paragraph essay is the conclusion paragraph. A conclusion paragraph has 3 sections to it. First of all, it should refer back to the introduction. That includes referencing the hook and restating the thesis. The second part of the conclusion summarizes the main points of your evidence in the body. And finally, it ends with a thought-provoking statement. A thought-provoking statement is something that makes the reader think or ask themselves questions. In my opinion, it's the most difficult part of an essay to write, but it's also the most important. Think of it this way. If somebody reads a lot of research or papers on something, you want yours to stand out somehow. You want it to be memorable. Otherwise, nobody's really going to think about what you said. So, if you force that person to say, wow, I never thought of it that way, or that's a crazy idea. I mean, whatever it is that you get them to think about, as long as it's memorable, it will give your paper a lot more validity to your reader. It's kind of like a trick. In a way, it's like advertising. If an advertisement is done well, you remember it. So think of it that way. It's the same idea. So once it's all said and done, a 5-paragraph essay has 1 introduction paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and 1 conclusion paragraph. Use this outline to help you remember the order of your own writing and your own paragraphs.